Welcome into the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman, at Eric Balkman on the X. You know me from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Slowdown, and of course the Fantasy Football Players Championship, myffpc.com. We got a great show for you tonight, and we got a great guest co-host. Ladies and gentlemen, you know him from, I believe, the Fantasy Football Report on RotoViz, amongst everything else that you're doing, Hasan Rahim. You follow him on the X. At HRR5010. Welcome in, my friend. So glad to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm very excited to be here and just chopped up the slate with you. It's been a fun season so far, and week 11 is going to be fun. We've got a banger on tap tonight, man. What do you think?
I'm excited. You know, and the thing is, last week we had this unbelievable Bengals-Ravens game, right? So for us to, and I'm with you, like I'm excited for this game. I'm pumped for this game to kick off to week 11. But like, think about what it's got to live up to from the previous week. I don't know if we're going to see any 55-point performances tonight like we saw with Jamar Chase, but it's still going to be a great game. Now, you say it's been a great season so far, Hasan. There's going to be a lot of people that disagree with you because of the injuries, especially at the wide receiver position. Clearly, your fantasy football teams are maybe in better shape than mine are right now.
No, mine are actually completely dead. You got to find like the beauty in the little things, right? I'll give you a great example. Last week, Sunday waiver run on FFPC. Trevor Lawrence is out. Put in a final bid. We get Matt Stafford. Fantastic. Unfortunately, I have errands to run. I forgot to make the swap. Guess who started Trevor Lawrence? And guess what team he was on? A Jamar Chase team, baby.
Oh, God.
One of the few teams that had Jamar Chase and lost.
Oh, that's just brutal. It's brutal. But it does happen. You know, and like you can't get around it. There's a few weeks ago, it was probably a month or so ago now. I forgot to set my Scott Fishbowl team, which at the time I was pretty sick about it, but I got over it because my team wasn't doing so hot. Now my team's been on a tear and it's got a really good shot at making the playoffs. And if that's the 1 week where I forget to set my lineup that keeps me out of the playoffs, I'm going to be really ticked off. Our producer, Matt Deutsch, also lost with Jamar Chase this past week too. I should check. I don't think I did. I had a few Jamar Chase teams. I think they all came through, but I'd have to go back and double check. It's one of those things, Hasan, where I don't even want to go back and check at this point because I'll just be sick about it if I find out I lost with Jamar Chase. But it happens. We move forward, and we'll be moving forward tonight on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. We're going to go around the NFL. Hasan and I are going to talk about one of the waiver wire darlings this past week in the FFPC, Gus Edwards. We're going to talk about the Packers running back situation with Marshawn Lloyd coming off injured reserve. We'll get into Isaiah Likely and as well as the news from a dynasty perspective that's maybe not great, maybe okay. We'll find out about it with J.J. McCarthy and his second surgery in Minnesota. Second segment, we'll get into preview that Thursday night game tonight, Washington and Philadelphia. We'll talk about Brian Robinson. We'll get into a little bit on Zach Ertz, Noah Brown, and, of course, Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith as well. We also will put together a weekly challenge lineup in the second half of the second segment tonight, something that you can do, and I'll tell you all about it in a second. We'll be putting together our own lineup. Hasan and I will be to try to get you paid this week in the FFPC. And then starter sits in the final segment, including but not limited to Audric Estime, Amari Cooper, Jake Ferguson, Bo Nix, and much more. That is our slate that we're going to be going through tonight. The FFPC Weekly Challenge is something that we've established a few years ago here at the FFPC Fantasy Football Players Championship. It started in week 2 of this year. And it's something that you can enter for as little as $35, but you can win up to $2,500. There's no draft in this format. There's no salary cap in this format. You just basically pick whatever players you want. No stacking. You can't stack in this format. 1 player per team, FFPC lineup, along with 2 extra flexes. Or you could play with kickers and defenses and have a 12-player lineup instead of a 10-team lineup. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. Or you can simply scan the QR code that our producer, Matt Deutsch, has put up on the screen right now, and you will be taken right to that registration page. Play in the Thursday night challenge, which will lock tonight at kickoff, which is just a little bit over an hour away. Or you can play in the Sunday challenge, which locks in at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. So let's get into it. All the news that's worth reporting here this week. We'll start off in Indianapolis, Hasan. Shane Steichen on Monday, after the Colts lost, said that Joe Flacco was going to be their starting quarterback going forward. Then we found out yesterday that it's not going to be Joe Flacco. It's going to be Anthony Richardson, not only starting against the Jets this weekend, but going forward the rest of the season. Flacco in the last 2 weeks, 2 touchdowns, 4 picks, and took not 5, not 6, but 7 sacks. Richardson famously pulled himself from a game because he needed a rest on a third and goal that was long yardage to get a few weeks back, but he will be back, according to Steichen, as the starter for the remainder of the season. We've been very excited about Josh Downs and his rise with Joe Flacco. I think we need to talk about this let's talk about Richardson first and foremost. Where does he register for you against the Jets this week, bearing in mind that what he's been able to do with his legs always seems to keep him on the fantasy radar? Your thoughts about Richardson this week against the Jets, Hasan?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the legs, right? Like that's sort of why people were drafting him where they were. Going back to preseason, he was anywhere between QB5 to QB7, depending on which drafts you were in. Everyone was paying the premium for that rushing upside. Now, the issue is it hasn't yielded anything.
No.
Right? Like you're looking at in the, let's see over here, according to the RotoViz Weekly Stat Explorer, of the 7 games he's played, the 6 games he's played. Sorry, I can't count. This season, he's been a QB2 or better in 1. So with that, that's about 12 fantasy points. A QB1 in exactly 1, that's week 1. And then he's been like a QB3 or worse. You're finding better, value on the waiver wire than you are with actually starting him. If you started him, he's actually been a detriment to your team because of the premium that you paid to acquire him right back in the draft. And then you just sort of got to keep rolling this guy out. And then you're treated to 11.9 points, 7 points, 6 points, right? I'm not too concerned about him pulling himself out of the game. If he needs a breather, he needs a breather. My real concern is that this guy might just not be ready, right? Like he looks like a true rookie, but not like in the Jaden Daniels kind of way, or right? He looks more like a rookie that's like the Zach Wilson kind of way.
Oh, that's not good.
Like it's kind of sad. It's sad because I was like, I'm a big believer of Richardson. He's got the cannon of an arm. We see what he can do with Downs. They also need to like just let Mitchell do the same thing, right? Like they gave Adonai Mitchell like an increase in snaps last week. He ran more routes. Get both of those guys on the outside, in my opinion. Run an RPO with JT, man. Like I think that's what everyone was thinking when they were drafting Richardson and JT and everybody, and where they were in the off season, and it just hasn't come to fruition, which is probably more of a coaching issue. Love the talent that Richardson's got. I'm just concerned. Like I wanted to ask you guys, how much Richardson did you guys wind up with?
It's a great question. And for me, I have him in a handful of leagues tops, and not necessarily because I liked him, Hasan. It was a total FOMO pick every time I pick Richardson.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think I only drafted him once, but I picked him up in a couple of salary cap leagues or auction leagues, however you want to say it. I picked him up in a couple of leagues there because I felt like this guy, his floor is so high. I need to draft him, and I need to pick him up at this price because worst comes to worst, he's just my backup then, right? Mm-hmm. And I haven't been playing him a ton. In fact, when he lost the job, I didn't cut him in those leagues. I still have him. But at this point of as we go into week 11, I have no interest in starting him in a single quarterback league, but I'm starting him in every super flex league. And I think that's the way you handle it this week. Now, to the weapons that he has. I know Michael Pittman practiced today. I don't know if he's going to play this week, but Josh Downs has sort of become the de facto number 1 receiver in Indianapolis, right? Now what happens knowing that Richardson is going to be throwing to him rather than Flacco? I think Downs is at least in the pool of receivers where we start to consider like a quarterback change this significant could be detrimental enough to Downs where we were locking him in as like a number 2 or number 3 receiver before. Now he might be on benches this week.
100% agree. Like I think that there's like if you go back a few weeks, like he just doesn't get the targets. He's always kind of getting missed by him on deep shots. He was like as you mentioned, he's going to be on benches, man. It's very frustrating and kind of sad, right? Because the pass volume goes down, the pace sort of will slow down. He's just not going to see the kind of deep shots he needs. And if there's going to be increased target competition from Mitchell, just sort of getting more routes and more opportunity, it's just one of those things in that like it's difficult to sort of trust, especially against the Jets, right?
Yeah.
Like, I really like the Jets for all of their issues have actually a very capable defense, right? Like that's like, I think that is sort of where I don't feel comfortable starting
Downs
or Mitchell or really any of these guys unless I really need to. And there are only 4 teams on bye, and so like I really don't see you scrounging for it.
I wonder how many FFPC people, because obviously when you're a volume player in the FFPC, you're probably placing waivers starting on Monday, definitely on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday we get the news that Richardson's starting. I wonder how many people pulled back bids that they had on 80 Mitchell, knowing that, oh, okay, now all of a sudden it's Richardson. This combo could work. I'm with you. Richardson is not ready for prime time, and Mitchell is a guy that I didn't even check. I should have checked my rosters to see if I picked him up for cheap anywhere. I don't know what's going to happen. If he's the starter the rest of the season, Richardson, I think Mitchell's kind of a wasted roster spot in redraft leagues. I just don't see a scenario where I'm going to be starting him. Maybe next week with 6 teams on bye, but I'm not.
Yeah, that's when you're going to start these guys. Like that's like the nuclear week where you're just sort of like, I gotta play somebody.
Or warm bodies. You're just looking for warm bodies at that point.
Yeah. Or the only way you're playing these guys, right, Downs, like and Mitchell this week, is if you're one of those teams that had like Diggs and Rashee Rice and all of a sudden Chris Godwin, and like you just are out, right? Like these are the injuries we're talking about at the top of the show, where if you're just one, I mean, at that point you're like sitting at like, if you're somehow still contending despite losing, multiple wide receivers that you picked early, I don't know how you did that. Please,
a lot of running backs, right? Yeah, it's got to be running backs and tight ends. That's how you're getting it done. It's the only way.
But like Diggs was going around like all the elite like running backs you needed, and then you had to make a decision point between Godwin and like a Brock Bowers, right? So it's like, like it's difficult. Like it's tricky. And if there are people out there who are surviving and thriving despite having a loss, guys like Rice plus Diggs plus Godwin, teach me your ways. I gotta figure that out.
Have you? And I think like I don't have any empirical evidence, Hasan, on this. It sure seems this year that receivers have gone down at a much higher rate than previous years, and elite receivers too.
Oh yes.
And running backs have stayed fairly healthy, at least compared to what has normally happened over the course of the last 5, even 10 years. I have all these leagues where I invested in receivers early. And I mean, I checked one of my dynasty. Granted, this is a 22-man roster. I checked one of my dynasty leagues today. I have 11 running backs on that team, Hasan. 11 running backs out of my 22 spots because I'm just waiting for the top guy to go down so I can start deploying these. And I've been collecting more and more of them. Top guys just aren't going down, or at least not at enough of a rate. It's weird to me to see all these running backs stay healthy this year, and yet it's the receivers that are letting us down.
Yeah, and I think it also, like, why we were chasing receivers, at least to me, was a little different, right? Because like everyone was chasing receivers, and that position gets really thin, really, really quickly. Like if you when everyone is suddenly pivoting to drafting the receivers, you're just either you got to lean in and like actually just accept like, hey, I got to get a handful of guys, or I'm just going to be starting. I'm going to be like genuinely starting just below mid-level guys, like in my other 2 wide receiver spots in the FFPC, which honestly, if you can hit the right combo of tight end and running back, it works.
Yeah. It does.
Otherwise you're missing out on actual game-winning upside. Like, and then also to your point, like the only real running back injury was CMC preseason, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think this is sort of anecdotal, and we do need to probably go and dig into this now for like injury rates, but like the rise of the running back by committee approach might actually be reducing these the injury risk rate, right? And then you also had people who were depressing or artificially depressing ADPs on some goated running backs like Saquon and Henry and everybody else who find themselves in new systems because of they might be older, they might be washed, and these guys are absolutely thriving and crushing.
There is, as I look at the running backs that went in the first 2 rounds in the FFPC main event this year, we complain about McCaffrey because of the injury, obviously.
Yep.
We complain about Breece Hall because of usage. We complain about Bijan Robinson because of usage, lack of production. We complain about Zamir Gibbs because of the presence of David Montgomery. Trevor Etienne has been leapfrogged a few weeks by Tank Bigsby, even when Etienne was healthy. I know Achane missed a couple of games. Jonathan Taylor missed a couple of games. The Pacheco thing hurts. I mean, I'll give you that. Like Pacheco and McCaffrey, obviously. But Kyron Williams has been healthy. Derrick Henry's been healthy. James Cook has been healthy. Josh Jacobs, all these guys, Alvin Kamara, the list goes on and on and on of all these running backs. We expected to miss at least a window of time, and it just hasn't happened. And the zero RBers, at least, I'll lump myself into that for some of my leagues. It's been frustrating. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so some of the guys you listed off there just got completely had buckets of really poor production due to injuries to the quarterback. HN, Kamara.
That's another good point. Yeah.
Right, HN was a smash, man. After week 1, you're just taking a victory lap of victory laps. And the second you get your Skylar Thompsons and whoever else in there, it's man, that offense is I would say
dead. It's
not functional or bad, but it really doesn't do justice to how badly they were created. They just completely, you can't use them, right?
Right. I want to, by the way, shout out to Dom Guzzetti, who was drafting next to me in Louisville at the end of August and Sunday night of 2 weeks before the season. Love always hearing from him. Fantasy Bro posting on YouTube. Robust running back drafters are feasting at the Sizzler right now for sure. Dylan Fink has a question. We can take his question here on YouTube. He wants us to set his lineup. He's got Jaden Daniels, Justin Herbert at quarterback. I am actually still playing Daniels, although it's close this week between Daniels and Herbert. I'm going to go with Daniels there. He's got to start 2 running backs between Dobbins, Walker, and Jacobs. I'm rolling with Walker and Jacobs there. And then the flex, I'm assuming, okay, he's got to start 2 receivers, right? So McLaurin and Hopkins there. And then it comes down to Tank Dell or J.K. Dobbins. I'm going to lean towards J.K. Dobbins this week. So if I'm setting the lineup here, Hasan, I go Jaden Daniels, all 3 running backs, McLaurin and Hopkins.
I just flop out Dobbins for Dell, right? Even though
that's what I'd be doing. I'm saying all 3 running backs. I'm sitting Dell this week.
Yeah. No, I think I would play Dell.
Right? Oh, you're playing Dell. Okay. All right.
I would play Dell, right? Nico was listed as limited. I think if he plays, it might be a net positive here for Dell. Now look, the Texans are the surprise, disappointment of the season, right? Outside of Nico and Mixon. Mixon is another guy we didn't touch on who's been absolutely crushing ADP. But outside of a surprise, where Dell was going was ridiculously high, but I still think that it's a pretty okay matchup for them, right? The issue here, at least the concern, would probably be the fact that it is the Cooper Rush-led Cowboys or possibly Trey Lance-led Cowboys, but I do like what Dell does bring just in terms of upside. Although I will say, if you're a favorite, Dobbins is by far and away the actual play there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
especially given Gus Edwards is he's on the injury report, I believe, and then also the fact that they just don't trust Kamani Vidal. So I think I'm with you in just if you're targeting the shootout potential of that Chargers Bengals game, then yes.
The thing is with Dell. So number one, I run about 24 fantasy teams myself, but I help run my son's team who's 11 years old. And Hasan, every time I screw something up, I hear it from him. And Dell let us down this past week, so that's probably poisoning my mind a little bit. I can't play Dell this week because my son will be right after me again if I screw this up and I play Dell and he stinks again. With the rise of Nico Collins or the return of Nico Collins, I am a little bit skittish there. It's very, very close. It's one of those things. You ask me tomorrow, I might say, yeah, play Dell and bench Dobbins. I don't know.
Honestly, thinking through it, you might be right though, right? Would you rather? I think just looking at just game totals itself. You'd rather play the running back in a high total game, right? Because Dobbins ostensibly or theoretically shouldn't get scripted out with no or limited Gus Edwards, right?
Yes, and 48 to your point, 48 in that Chargers game, 42 in that Cowboys game, and that is probably a negative game script, I would say, for Tank Dell as they're 7.5 point favorites.
The established to run harder than the Houston Texans this season. I don't know if it's possible, right? Joe Mixon has been their key weapon this year.
He has been, and he continues to be too. And that's you just mentioned it, how good he's been so far this season. And he continues to just wrap up big weeks for the Texans. Swim Diamond joining us once again this week on Twitch. Would you trade Amon-Ra St. Brown for Justin Jefferson? Swim Diamond thinks Sam Darnold's in a downfall. I think Darnold could, as bad as he was last week, I think he can get right this week as they visit Tennessee. Tennessee is one of the best rush defenses. I think via the DVOA stat, I think the Titans' rush defense is right up there, maybe the best in the league. But you can attack them through the air. Darnold's going to have the opportunity to do that with Jefferson this week. So Jefferson could get his fantasy stock to peak potential again after week 11. Who would you rather have the rest of the way, Hasan? Would you rather have Amon-Ra St. Brown and that elite Lions offense, or would you rather have Justin Jefferson, who is playing on a pretty good offense himself? And don't forget, we got week 3 now coming up of TJ Hawkinson back in the fold there as well.
Yeah, and actually, I think for that, I'm actually going to go straight to the RotoViz strength of schedule streaming app and just sort of look this over. So Detroit rest of the season has the 3rd worst schedule, right? So Detroit's got, Jacksonville, Indy, Chicago's actually been surprisingly good, and then they end with just like a bunch of bad, matchups: Green Bay, Buffalo, Chicago again, and then San Fran, right? A couple of those project to be shootouts, but like strong pass defenses. Minnesota is a little bit lighter, and again, to your point, even with TJ Hawkinson coming in, soaking up those targets, man, like, find me another receiver not named Jamar Chase who has 50-point PPR upside, and like, I think that's it, right? Like,
I it's funny because like when Amon-Ra St. Brown has his blowups, they're usually like 12 catches for 140 yards and maybe 2 touchdowns. Yeah. When Justin Jefferson has a blowup, it's like 14 catches for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, right? Not to say Amon-Ra St. Brown has a limited ceiling. I don't think that's the case. I just think the explosion is much bigger with Jefferson when he goes off as opposed to Amon-Ra St. Brown.
The other downside risk, I guess, with Amon-Ra that I've seen this year on teams that have relied on him heavily, the emergence of Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
He's the kind of guy who'll post, like a 3 catches, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns kind of stat line. And that just sucks all the air out of like a Amon-Ra, blow up game. Because Gibbs is going to get his work in the receiving game. And then Montgomery is. And now an added wrinkle on top of that is that they're remembering that Sam Laporta, the 1st round pick in FFPC, exists. And we're seeing him come on now. Right? So it's like, as much as I love both players, I think that the runway is a little bit clearer for Jefferson as opposed to what you're dealing with Amon-Ra.
Let's go back to YouTube here. Ray C, who's tuning in this week, has the opportunity to trade Rachaad White and Najee Harris and get Josh Jacobs in exchange for him. Now, I will bring this up regarding Najee Harris. He practiced in full today. Jaylen Warren did not. In fact, he was added to the injury report today with a back injury. This is a midweek addition to the injury report and wasn't limited. He got a did not practice. This is really good news for Najee Harris and maybe going forward too, because a back injury can be very tricky sometimes on a multi-week. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe he plays this week. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's back next week. I don't know. We're working with limited information here. Your thoughts in general, number one on this trade. I would be for it if you can give up White and Harris in exchange for Jacobs and still having Joe Mixon and Tyrone Tracy on your team. I think, elite talent above everything else. You're getting the best player in this deal. So I would do it. But then I want to get your thoughts too on this Pittsburgh Steelers running back situation. They are also in a massive game this week against Baltimore with a high total, Hasan.
Yeah. So before we go anywhere, let's just discuss Rachaad White for real quick, because he's in that timeshare with
Bucky Irving.
That's right. I'm just trying to pick it up because he seems to be getting a lot more of the targets of late. And I think that's where he's had like 2 RB1 weeks since they come out of the bye. Against Baltimore, he put up about 30 points. And then last week against the Niners, he put up about 20 points, right? So, you're looking at 2 guys who I think are pretty good. Again, to your point, Najee Harris, he's full go, probably Jaylen Warren. I don't think this is necessarily a 1-for-1 trade. This should surely be a 2-for-2, right? Like can we like get some negotiation, probably get a throw in on the way back, right? Like, can we make it a 2-for-2? I don't know necessarily what it would be, but I think I actually like Josh Jacobs a little bit more than everybody else, right? Like as you mentioned, just all else equal, I'd much rather have him. But I feel like he could get a little bit more, don't you think? Just a little bit more.
Here's the thing. It's especially let's just focus on this week. Now I was talking about, I live in Northeast Wisconsin, just very like a half-hour drive southwest of Lambeau Field, Hasan. And I was talking on my radio show that I have here with I wouldn't say Packers beat reporter, but a guy who covers the Packers for the Wisconsin radio network. And I said, I think the way the Packers win this week against Chicago is not necessarily attacking them through the air. Even though Jaquan Brisker got placed on IR today for Chicago, I think you can run on the Bears. And I think the Packers, number one, have an offensive line to do it. Number two, they're healthy this week for the first time in several weeks. And number three, that Jacobs-Wilson 1-2 punch, I think is going to be huge in week 11. I'm projecting a big week for Jacobs, and this could sort of springboard him to a second half of the season where the Packers schedule, there's some tough matchups, but I do think it lightens up a little bit. This could be a big couple of months for Josh Jacobs.
And I'm with you, right? Like, according to again, just to go back to the RotoViz strength of schedule tool, they have got the 6th friendliest schedule for running backs. And I mean, I really don't see Jacobs ceding work to Emmanuel Wilson. I don't see him ceding work to Marshawn Lloyd. And all else equal, like, Jordan Love is that guy. Like, I'd rather have him. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather get the guy tethered to Jordan Love. I'm like, it's crazy. As crazy as it may sound, like, I've always been sort of like a anti Josh Jacobs at cost kind of guy, but like, I kind of I would want him to carry me through. Now, the only caveat to that is that Tampa Bay has the second best running back schedule, right? And again, it's just sort of, again, for White, it's more a question of, can he continue to get this receiving work, or is it just going to be more like Bucky Irving show? Because a lot of these matchups, 2 are against Carolina, 1 is against the Dallas Cowboys who don't have a quarterback, and then you have the Raiders, which all shapes up to be more like Bucky Irving games on the ground and pound as opposed to through the air.
I want to move on. I want to stick in the backfield, but let's talk about one that we just discussed with Dylan Fink on YouTube, the Chargers backfield. Gus Edwards, Hasan, limited in yesterday's practice. I have not seen the practice report from the Chargers today. This was the first time he played in more than a month this past week for Edwards, and they rode him pretty hard. He was activated off of injured reserve, and right away, first game, 10 carries, 55 yards. This could be a situation where they're kind of managing him a little bit, making sure that he's fresh enough to take some of the load off from J.K. Dobbins this week. Cincinnati run defense, not exactly that great. Edwards was a guy I picked up. I did end up picking up in a few of my leagues last night during the waiver wire run in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, which is primarily where I play. But regarding Edwards this week, is he creeping into flex territory? The matchup seems to be good. I know Dobbins is still going to be involved. Your thoughts on Edwards, knowing that he could fall into the end zone, and if he gets that, he might be worth starting. That's
all you need, right? Again, we were talking about how this like game environment is exciting. It sort of sets up a little bit nicely, right? Mm-hmm. And you kind of want the points here somewhere, right? We know the Chargers are kind of dedicated to the run. They don't necessarily have the same freewheeling wide receivers that they used to. Mm-hmm. McConkey is solid. Justin Herbert shows why he's elite, but they still need better running, better receiving weapons. And then on top of that, the way they're going to win against the Bengals is probably, honestly, as you said, through the ground, right? Like, why not? Like, I think Edwards is definitely a flex play, especially for me. We did put in some bids on Edwards on our FFPC teams. We didn't win any, unfortunately. We don't have a lot of fob remaining, so we just were more like price enforcing a little bit. But like what he went for was a little outside of our range. But again, to your point, shows you the sharps are on him. Like it's just one of those things. I'd like a piece somewhere.
What did you see as far as, because I haven't looked at Fantasy Mojo to see what the prices were. What did you see Edwards going for? I mean, was he between $200 and $300, $100 and $200? What did you see him going at?
In all honesty, I haven't checked out Fantasy Mojo either, and all I did was see who we won, and it's like the $3 backs. I
got it. All right.
I was like, all right, I don't even want to see what's going on anymore.
Mr. Bakes a lot on YouTube. This is interesting because I think that the trade that he just made could springboard in a lot of different directions here. He ended up moving Chase Brown and T. Higgins off of his team, so a pair of Bengals. He gets Jonathan Taylor and Devontae Adams in exchange. Now, if we look at this from sort of a macro perspective, not just tunnel visioning it to this trade, Chase Brown, it looks like wheels up for him. They bring in Khalil Herbert, I think more just to keep Brown fresh, not to necessarily compete for touches. We saw what happened last Thursday. First carry, he fumbles. We hardly see him again. We may not have seen him again the rest of the game. Chase Brown looks unbelievable. T. Higgins is coming back. You're buying low on him. I think he's going to play this week, but far from a lock. We'll see what happens there. But definitely a guy that could have a big second half of the season. Flip it to the other side, Jonathan Taylor. I never liked running backs on teams with mobile quarterbacks, because that mobile quarterback, a lot of times, instead of checking it down, he's just going to take off running. It penalizes Jonathan Taylor's pass catching viability. So I don't know if he's necessarily going to have the greatest 2 months of fantasy football. And then Devontae Adams, he's dealing with an illness right now. The Jets offense seems broken. I think Taylor and Adams are kind of going in the wrong direction, whereas Brown, it looks like he's going in the right one. Higgins, I don't know. So at face value, I think it's a fair trade. I think I'd rather have the Brown-Higgins side of this deal. Hasan, your thoughts on this?
No, I'm 100% aligned with you, even though Higgins hasn't exactly played a lot this season.
Yeah.
And trust me, I have him on way more teams than I realized. And I think I'm at like 28% Higgins in my best ball portfolio, which is a great way to lose 28% of your buy-in, which is it's an instant L. But in the 5 games that Higgins has been active, he's put up about like 16.2 PPR points, right? And look, Chase Brown is him. Like I'm a big Khalil Herbert stan. Like I still don't see him really usurping Chase Brown right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just is that guy. And I really want the 2 guys attached to Joe Burrow in this fantasy bonanza circus that is the Bengals offense in terms of points, right? Like they can go toe to toe with the Ravens. Their defense is bad enough that they have to stay in shootouts. Like even this week, there's a 48-point total, right? Like this is like I really would much rather have the guys, as you mentioned, the Bengals, as opposed to moving away. Especially, I really don't want any part of Adams. I think he's the one that's really, really dragging the side of like a little bit of aversion towards that trade. Not necessarily just JT, but I really don't think Adams even matches anywhere close to Higgins. So I can't see this being 1-to-1. You know what I mean?
It's you have to look at the offenses too.
Yeah.
I mean, like Adams has the better track record. I think he's probably the better talent. But I mean, the Bengals offense, man, they are clicking on all cylinders right now, and the Jets are doing the exact opposite. Now, Permar99, our good buddy, points out that Jonathan Taylor actually does have better numbers with Anthony Richardson than Joe Flacco. And if that's the case, and far be it for me to disagree with Permar on his research, because he's usually spot on with this kind of stuff, then obviously that makes the deal a little bit more palatable on my end for sure. But what will happen going forward, time will tell to see what happens there for the last 2 months of the season. Let's talk about the Jaguars. Ben Arthur, who covers the team, announced, or I shouldn't say announced, but he reported that Doug Pederson announced Trevor Lawrence has already been ruled out for week 11. There's a chance he could come back in week 13 after the Jaguars have their bye next week. So it is Mac Jones getting the start against I don't want to say a ferocious Detroit defense, but a very aggressive one. A defense that will come after the quarterback hard. And I don't know if Jacksonville has the horses to match wits and match talent with the Lions this week. Jones played a very ferocious defense last week in the Vikings, held his own. I mean, 111 yards. He threw 2 picks. He did not throw any touchdowns. He's the type of guy that you probably, even if you picked him up, I don't even know if I'd flex him out in a super flex league against Detroit this week. But when you look at the rest of the skill position players there in Jacksonville this week going up against Detroit, Hasan, Travis Etienne, Brian Thomas, who's dealing with an injury right now, Evan Engram. I mean, what is the impact on Mac Jones throwing to these guys? What are we doing with them in our lineups this week? Do you like any of them? Are you benching any of them? When you look at, again, not necessarily Mac Jones, but the skill guys in Jacksonville going up against Detroit.
Yes, that's actually just like a really bad run out, right? For guys who have Ingram and Brian Thomas. ETN has sort of disappointed this season. I'm starting him because my teams tend to be very running back lean, unfortunately, and I just need a guy who actually will play 50% of the snaps as opposed to Herbert, who might not play and and a bunch of like random backups. But guys like BTJ and Evan Ingram, like that gets really dicey, right? Like I've got like a legitimate decision point after that news, like that news item broke, is Brian Thomas or Xavier Worthy, right?
Yeah.
And that's like, oh my God, like, do I just play Brian Thomas and Mac Jones and just pray,
hope.
Yeah,
Yeah, pray, hope, pray and hope. Yeah.
Get to 0 with Xavier Worthy and watch him being overthrown. And Evan Ingram, I'm definitely starting him in FFPC. Like just that 1.5 PPR is like really enticing. But outside of that, like I really don't know if I could start him, for example, in a standard PPR league, right? And definitely like not maybe like there are other kind of extremer guys that if you were able to sort of luck out on, like you should be starting them ahead of like Ingram. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just it's a really tough run out for like what is a couple of really elite receiving options. And I think between you and me, and I just want to get your take on this for next season. Are you optimistic that this might depress their prices next year when it comes down to like draft season, when we like kick back up and like after the Super Bowl?
I on a different show. I was talking about this exact question, but with the Bears rather than the Jaguars. I think if the Bears get the right coach in there and not Shane Waldron, to lead Caleb Williams in this offense, you're going to see some depressed values on the Bears where you can get Rome Odunze cheaper. You can get Caleb Williams cheaper. And to that point with the Jaguars, we as fantasy football players, I know it's a weakness of mine. I definitely know it's a weakness of a lot of the people I compete against. Recency bias is a real thing. Recency bias will have us remembering what happened at the end of the season, whether or not Trevor Lawrence comes back, whether or not Mac Jones is going to be the starting quarterback the rest of the way. We're going to remember the Jaguar season once again going out with a whimper rather than those electric plays Brian Thomas was making. We're not going to remember these 10-catch performances we saw from Evan Engram in September and October when he was healthy. And oh, by the way, Christian Kirk is on IR. People are going to forget about him too. So I think, yes, to answer your question, anytime you have a team that is finishing going out on a low note, you're always going to get depressed value the upcoming season. And I think the good players take advantage of it to a degree. Like you don't want to be heavily investing in these guys with, at 30% share or anything like that. And you're picking them 3 rounds ahead of where they should be going. But yes, I think if you're crafty enough, you're going to have an opportunity to cash in on Jacksonville next year. Hasan, let's do this. Oaks on YouTube. This is a tough one. And I was looking at this. Brian Robinson or Khalil Shakir at flex. Brian Robinson Jr. obviously going up against the Eagles tonight. So this is a decision Oaks has to make. Khalil Shakir is in that what could be a shootout against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday. So if we look at how Shakir's been used, again, I don't have any. This is just what I'm seeing when I watch him. Khalil Shakir is having to make a lot of plays right at the line of scrimmage or a couple of yards beyond the line of scrimmage and then just pick up some yak. He is not involved in any crossing patterns or posts or sluggos or anything like that. If that's the way Buffalo wants to use him, fine. We have to understand that. So he's going to be used. Is he going to be used enough? This might come down to how good of a game Brian Robinson has at the goal line tonight. Where would you weigh in on this? Would you play Shakir over Robinson or vice versa?
Man, that's actually a really good sit-start question, and it's tough, right? Because to your point, with Khalil Shakir, this is a very consistent 10 points, 10 PPR point 4 guy who needs that end zone to get a little bit higher. Now, the issue with the end zone is we know exactly where the ball is going when Josh Allen is out there, right?
Yeah.
Brian Robinson, on the other hand, I think that he actually, I guess this really comes down to, and I haven't checked the news reports, but has there been any late-breaking news about, him being on a snap count or being limited, or is this like a full go? Because he's been close to returning last week. And, if he's a full go, I think I might rather just roll him out and hope that he sidelines Eckler because Brian Robinson, before he got before this injury, the small injury and had to take a few weeks off, was just rolling, man. He was fun, exciting, good to watch.
So here's the thing. I was talking with this with another FFPC player who was asking me for advice earlier this afternoon. And he thinks is Robinson going to be a full go. And I said, well, what do you mean by full go? Because full go to me could mean, hey, he's going to be getting 25 touches this game or whatever. I don't think he gets to that level. But I think he gets to the full go level of sharing the backfield with Eckler, what he has been doing when these guys have both been healthy at the same time this year. So I would imagine between 15 and 20 touches for Robinson tonight. Maybe that's on the high side. Minimum 10. You're going to get 10. You're probably going to get about 15. I think that's a full go for Robinson. Now, I'll put this out there too. Permar99 says, remember, Robinson is coming off a hamstring injury.
Yep.
This is a soft tissue injury. He'd rather take Khalil Shakir. Jake Venuti, the FFPC hero, who I'm competing against in a couple of private dynasty leagues, he says Khalil Shakir is PPR gold. They're using him like they used Cole Beasley a couple of years ago. Those guys are much smarter than I am. I'm going to lean towards Khalil Shakir over Brian Robinson tonight. To your point, a little bit like I think regardless, because we haven't seen any reporting about how Robinson's going to be used. Let's err on the side of caution. Get the PPR guy in there with Shakir over Robinson here. Let's do two quick things. Let's do two quick things. I know we're up against it. Jared Goff or Jaden Daniels this week? Bill Hollywood wants to know on YouTube. Would you at least think about Goff over Daniels? Interesting you say this, Bill, because I do. Those are my two quarterbacks in one of my leagues this year, and I did think about Goff over Daniels. The potential for a total featuring 50, 55 points, maybe even 60 points tonight between Washington and Philly, that's too juicy for me. I'm playing Daniels over Goff. Goff, a guy that, because of how exciting that running game is for Detroit with Gibbs and Montgomery, Goff could just be like 15 for 18 for a touchdown or two and an interception. Like, I just don't. I see a much bigger upside with Daniels. I'm playing Daniels over Goff.
100%. And like you said, 15 for 18. I'm actually rolling a Goff in the league, and I'd be thrilled with that because I'm expecting like 12 for 15 with like no touchdowns. Like, it all goes to Montgomery and Gibbs as they just sort of run all over, roughshod over Jacksonville, right?
Right, exactly.
Like, there's like a serious downside risk there, and like we have to start him in one league.
What about and this is the last thing I'll bring up before we take a quick break. Dynasty wise, JJ McCarthy undergoes a second knee surgery to address some swelling that happened when he was rehabbing the initial knee injury. He took a step up in his rehab and apparently had some swelling there, had to have a second surgery. Are you at all concerned if you do have JJ McCarthy in a super flex dynasty league? You at all concerned by this, or is this kind of like, this is a nothing burger, hasn't changed his timeline of when he expects to be back? How do you feel about this McCarthy news?
Yeah, without knowing if there's long lasting like career altering injury like effects, and man, like I'm really in on JJ McCarthy just because look at what Sam Darnold was able to do. I want all the pieces of that KOC offense. I
am with you on this for sure. And like I don't play in too many super flex dynasty leagues. I may or may not have McCarthy on one. I'd have to go back and check. And I just don't have time to tonight because we have so much more to get to on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Coming up is our Thursday night football preview. We're going to talk more about this Robinson versus Eckler thing. I want to talk about Zach Ertz in an FFPC tight end premium league, what you're doing with him against the Eagles. And we'll even get into the Philly defense tonight. I think they might be a sneaky start. We'll get Hasan Rahim's thoughts on this. He of the RotoViz Fantasy Football Report. I'm Eric Balkman. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere. We roll on right after this.
You talk about utilizing something called perpetual reloading to ensure something called a permanent championship window with FFPC Dynasty Leagues. How do we make sure that perpetual reloading is what we're doing in our rookie drafts every year to make sure that we're always competing for titles year in and year out?
Yeah, so we always have this tension between playing a little bit for the future and playing for the present. You'll have drafters jump into the startup. They'll draft the veterans. They're trying to win in that first year. Sometimes they do. I don't want to in any way, shape, or form suggest that doesn't work because you see some of those teams compete and win titles. And yet, when we're thinking about the best way to control your chances to win, you want to be in the playoffs year after year. You want your championship window to always be open. You don't want to get to a point where you build, and then have a couple of years where you're going for it and then you're rebuilding again. You want to be in it every year. You want to get as many buys as possible so you don't have to compete in that quarterfinal round. You build a more powerful team. You can't control the injury that you have to the key player that cost you a title or the 50-point game that a non-elite player like Amari Cooper scores and knocks you out. You can control having one of the best teams every single season. The way that you do that is you build depth in your player talent across all those positions. You build depth in your picks. In order to execute some of those types of things, you trade down, you trade peak players, you trade young players. You've got to trade things that people want. A lot of times I think when people are trying to reload or rebuild, they're trying to trade distressed assets at a level that the rest of the group isn't interested in, and then you feel like you can't move. If you're going to make trades, you got to trade things that people want. You can also.
What are we doing when we're drafting? Well, we're telling ourselves happy stories about players we want to pick, less happy stories about players we don't want to pick. And part of that is being ready to abandon our own carefully crafted narratives when it's time to abandon them, right? Like, bail, this was not working, So like we come in with super hard opinions, and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. The better fantasy players are the people who acknowledge quickly that, hey, this isn't working out. Doesn't mean you have to abandon a player, but it means you have to abandon the approach, and maybe you have to go with a different player. I mean, if people were playing Stephon Diggs last year down the stretch, they were only playing him because his name is Stephon Diggs. You have to be ready to acknowledge, hey, this guy's not getting the job done. I did it. Bloom and I had a big discussion about this last December, and I'm saying you can't play him right now, right? And I know that's a hard decision to make because why? FOMO. We're going to miss out on that big game. The minute I sit this guy down, he's going to have the big game. Well, maybe. But also, while he is not having great games, there are other guys on your roster having great games. And I think that's to me, the hardest thing about fantasy is like, when do I divorce myself from my narrative? When do I tell when do I acknowledge my happy story is not coming true? I need to figure something else out. And the people who are good at that are the people.
By the way, a happy belated birthday to the Hall of Famer, Bob Harris from Football Guys, celebrating a birthday this past week. Thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate everything you've done, not only for this show, but the industry as well. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman. He's Hasan Rahim from the Fantasy Football Report over at RotoViz. Hasan, are you doing other stuff over at RotoViz besides that show with Kevin and Blair?
No, that's like the only one that I'm doing right now. As life is a little bit busy, the goal of the dream has been for the last few years is to just get back into the swing of things in the off season, and then I find that like Blair's written everything I want to do, and it's really frustrating because he's done all the work. And I'm like, come on, man, because it's gonna be we chat on the side. But yeah, the goal is to get back, at least start writing again because it helps, right? Like not just me, but not just like or the readers, but it also helps me like at least put together some thoughts about where the season would be and helps like really suss out fact from fiction, because a lot of the work that I like to do is around running back usage and just figuring out what's real, what's fake as you go around drafting in the off season, which has been a pretty core part of like at least my best ball success. So hoping to get back into it next year.
Yeah, it's time consuming, but it's worth it. I mean, I did some work for Football Guys. I think, God, what would this have been? 2021 and 2022, I think. And the more I wrote, the more I think it just made me not a better fantasy player. I just think it helped me feel like I had a better handle on the situation, right? As far as drafting goes, as far as lineup setting and everything like that. I just feel like the more you immerse yourself in it, I think there's a point where you get too into it and then it's like paralysis by analysis. But I think there is like a step forward. Like we always can do a little bit more than we think what we're capable of. And I think when we're at that level, we're operating at peak fantasy football efficiency. Speaking of which, Hasan, I want to address some of the stuff that came up in the chat during the break. So Permar99 said that Jaden Daniels is becoming more of a pocket passer now because his ribs aren't completely healed. So I think that's worth monitoring as well, because like when that initially happened, I think there was a non-zero chance that he was going to miss multiple weeks. He didn't miss any weeks. So I think that they might be healing. Permar also said, is Marshawn Lloyd taking that final roster spot for the Packers this week or not? The Packers have an open roster spot because they traded Preston Smith last week at the NFL trade deadline. They have done nothing to add or to fulfill that roster spot. I 100% expect that it will be Marshawn Lloyd taking that roster spot as far as all the reporting that's coming out of Green Bay. Permar. Yeah, I think Lloyd is going to be active. I shouldn't say active, but he'll be on the active roster. Joined by FFPC main event royalty, Nick Zappone, who was on one of my other shows a couple of weeks ago. He is the leader right now in the FFPC main event for that $1 million grand prize. He points out that there was news that came out about the JJ McCarthy thing. It wasn't another surgery. It was an injection instead of a surgery, which I think gives us the warm and fuzzies to a certain point as far as McCarthy goes as well. Brent Studebaker, a longtime FFPC dynasty player, new offensive coordinator. What do we think of Zamir White this week? Luke Getsy is out in Las Vegas. They have a new OC there. Hasan, I don't know if anything like this is been my whole take on it from the start. As long as Brock Bowers is featured and as long as Jacoby Myers is relevant, that's all I really care about in Las Vegas. I don't know if White suddenly becomes relevant, but I'll give the floor to you. What do you think this means, this change in offensive coordinator for the Raiders means for the rest of the players there?
I just want Brock Bowers, man.
Yeah.
We made I have distressingly little Brock Bowers in my best ball portfolio, but a lot more in my managed FFPC portfolio. And I was legitimately sad when I had to actually put him on the bench, man. He's so exciting to watch. Zamir White versus Alexander Mattison is sort of a question. Like, realistically, everyone was chasing Zamir White. Like, I think we picked up Mattison in our off season, in the week 1 waiver runs, because like we had really poor running backs, and I still think Mattison is going to be a thorn in Zamir White's side. I do think White might be interesting this week in supreme negative script against the Raiders, but that actually just makes me more interested again in Bowers, right?
Yeah, it's Bowers and it's Myers. I mean, I love Myers this week too. They are 7-point dogs on the road in Miami. What does it mean for Zamir White down the road, Brent? I don't know, but I'm definitely not excited about it. Joe King wants to know if new offensive coordinator Scott Turner can block. I don't think he can. So they're going to have to figure that out on the field with the offensive line. We
can just get them to figure it out. Just put him in there.
Well, here's the thing. It's Scott Turner. His dad, Norv, is an offensive consultant. Have Norv take over play calling, and you put Scott Turner out there as like the bonus tackle, right? And that's another body, at least, to get in the way. Listen, when you got a chip against those pass rushers for the Dolphins, having an OC out there might just be the tonic that you need for sure. In all kidding aside, let's get into this. Well, let's focus on serious mode. Commanders Eagles tonight, Hasan. This is going to be an unbelievable game. Fingers crossed. I've said that before, and they turn into laughers. But let's get into the Thursday night football preview. Washington has Jaden Daniels at quarterback, one of my favorite quarterbacks coming into this season. I drafted him as a starter in a couple of spots. I drafted him as a backup in a bunch of other spots earlier in drafting season when you could get him cheaper. Is he the rookie of the year in your opinion right now? And is there anything going on as far as his rib injury or as far as Washington that leads you to believe his second half of the season won't be as good as his first half?
Yeah, so as far as the rookie of the year is concerned, I think he's actually got that locked up. I don't have my Vegas futures pulled up over here, but I do believe he might actually be the odds-on favorite. I think it's I'm just trying to pull this up here. I think he is the actual. Yeah, I think it's minus 3,000 for Jaden Daniels. There's absolutely no way he's going to be dethroned by Bo Nix or Drake May, right? I think Washington. No. Washington has an outside chance of making it to, they might actually make the playoffs this season, which is kind of impressive, right? And so I think there's just no way that he seeds the rookie year.
Honestly, Hasan, you know who his biggest threat might be? It might be the aforementioned Brock Bowers. That'd be the only guy at this point. He might have a better shot than Nix, May, Caleb Williams, any of those guys.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess from a value betting perspective, because I'm a donkey and I love throwing away money, the plus 4,000 is enticing, but
realistically,
I think it's just going to be Daniels,
right,
man. There's just no way. But outside of that, he's been really fun. A lot of people have been calling him the RG3 on steroids, this era. But I want to get your take on this. How fun is it watching Terry F1 beat Terry F1 again?
Who did I talk to about this in the offseason? Some FFPC player. And we were talking, this is after the Commanders had drafted Daniels. And we talked about Daniels as a player for a little bit. And I said, well, what about the rest of the team? And he said, if you could think up a quarterback skill set that would be perfect for what to accentuate McLaurin's strengths, it would be Jaden Daniels. This is the perfect quarterback to be throwing to him. And quite frankly, even when McLaurin seems to have a bad game, it always seems like it's fantasy palatable, right? You don't regret starting him. It's been awesome to see McLaurin and Daniels with this connection that they've had all season. McLaurin has rehabbed his dynasty value, a guy that's not super old, a guy that is going to be a force for the next half decade. It's been great to see. And it's great to see that we can count another offense as fantasy viable with Washington, thanks to Jaden Daniels, not only because of the quarterback, but because of McLaurin. You think about Noah Brown, who I think is a guy I never really thought about drafting or rostering. I probably have Noah Brown on 5 or 6 teams right now, and I might be starting him this week in 1 or 2. So the fact that Daniels even making this guy fantasy viable, Noah Brown, is unbelievable. Think about Zach Ertz and the fantasy, the good tight end 1 games he's already had this year. Maybe another one tonight. We'll see. We talked a little bit about Robinson and Eckler. I want to just throw this at you. I like the idea of Gus Edwards in Los Angeles because it keeps J.K. Dobbins' usage down, but not to a point where you wouldn't want to start him. I like the idea of Emmanuel Wilson grabbing every third series roughly in Green Bay because it keeps Jacobs fresh for the season. And I like the idea of Robinson and Eckler healthy together because these guys become, granted, in a 1 week scenario, you probably just want one of these guys out so you can play the other one. But long term, the rest of the season, these guys are both flex-worthy plays, especially in a game like this tonight. I would have no problem, Hasan, starting Brian Robinson or Austin Eckler, depending upon how my team, the rest of my roster dictated it. I think both these guys could put up double-digit points tonight.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I'm looking at the NFL Splits app on RotoViz, and in the 7 games that Robinson's played this year, he's played 6 with Eckler, and he scored like 13 point. He's averaged 13.1 points. PPR points per game with Eckler in the lineup, right?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't. He isn't a guy who makes hay on the targets. Although the targets are pretty. They're still not necessarily there when Eckler's out either. He's the guy who gets it done on the ground, right? And so and he's his expectation on TDs is there is about 0.7 to 0.8%, 0.8. He's just still a guy that I want to start. To your point, you can start both of them. It's not an issue,
And not that you would have this on a lot of teams. In fact, I don't think it have any teams. If you got to start one of them as your second running back and one of them as a flex, I think that's fine too. I don't fall into the whole, I can't play them both because they're on the same team. Total in this game is 50. Start them both. See what happens tonight.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was thinking of it just from a fantasy expected points perspective, right? You just want those expected points in your lineup. At least that's how I think of it when I have these guys or when I'm drafting them on the same team or have them on the same team, right? Think back to last year with Achane and Mostert. If you had them both somehow on your same team, and I did because they were both kind of cheap, you were starting them both, right? This is kind of a similar situation here where the total's high enough. We're looking at 4 teams on bye. What's the worst that could happen, right? I would much rather start Robinson than a lot of other guys on my teams. I can tell you that right now.
I would say as long as you bring it up, the worst that could happen, Philly gets up 21-3 in the second quarter and Robinson is neutered. But at that point, Eckler should be better. So right. I guess, it's a yin and yang thing too. Okay, let's do this. War Eagle 2178 wants to know on Twitch, but thanks for watching us on Twitch tonight. Jaden Daniels or Joe Burrow? This is very, very close for me.
That's a good one.
And this is horrific, a horrific way to look at it. I am going to say you play Daniels because I usually err on the side of the guys playing in prime time when it seems like everything is equal. The stars usually come out under the lights, so I would lean towards Daniels over Burrow. But that's my horrific reason why for doing it. At least I get to watch him tonight and see what would happen. Your thoughts, Daniels versus Burrow?
That's as good a reason as any. That's a ridiculously good. I don't know how you got there, but that's amazing.
I could see again if War Eagle 2178 was drafting earlier in the drafting season, you could have easily gotten Burrow as a top 5 guy and Daniels after as quarterback 13, quarterback 14. I could see how it could happen late in the season. I'm with you. Yeah. I don't think that happens very much, but it draft early enough, you get value.
And I went to the Gillespie just to sanity check it, and it's razor thin. You're looking at a 1 point PPR difference between the median, right? This is such a damned if you do, damned if you don't. You might not make the right call. So you just, again, to your point, I don't mind playing the guy in prime time.
Yeah.
Especially on Thursday night in a divisional game, on a high total game. Why not?
Tony Nelson or Tony Nelson on YouTube, I'm not sure which one it is. He wants to know if he should lock in Terry McLaurin over Cedric Tillman. I love Cedric Tillman this week. I'm a big fan of I'm starting him in a lot of leagues where I have to start 3 receivers. but I cannot in good conscience say, yeah, play Tillman over McLaurin. Now, Permar will tell you that both pass defenses are going to be strong tonight. He thinks it's going to be a running game since the run defenses tonight are weak. That said, and I get where Permar's coming from, I still can't in good conscience say, yeah, bench McLaurin, play Tillman. I'm playing McLaurin over Tillman this week.
I am as well. Again, just sticking with the Gillespie theme here. It's a clear 1.5 point PPR median edge to McLaurin over Tillman. Also, I don't necessarily know if I want to be playing like what's interesting, I guess, is like against the Saints, like you could see like where Tillman the Browns play the Saints, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's like a game that has like a 44.5 point total. Like I don't necessarily see that really being. I can see it being like pseudo exciting, but I also see like, Njoku kind of taking a lot away. I can see like, just I can see more downside risk with the Tillman pick. And I just, again, to our point, like I'd rather play McLaurin. He's at like a 15.4 PPR point floor this season. That's his average across all games. Like that's a ridiculous floor for a wide receiver.
I also like the fact that I've seen, like, granted, it's not like I watch a ton of Commanders football, but I've seen a lot of like where even when the Commanders get inside the 10 and the 5, they're still looking at McLaurin, which is nice. That's like Devontae Adams treatment in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, like where you're still looking at that receiver that close to the end zone. That's a good feeling. I want to move on to Noah Brown because there are plenty of people that are going to be flexing him out tonight. Permar says just cut Noah Brown. He had an opportunity last week to have a huge game and obviously fell short. Doesn't have many end zone targets. He's saying cut bait. Permar, if you could see my rosters, you would know that I still need to cling on to Noah Brown. That's that 19th or 20th player on my team. So I'm not cutting him. But as far as starting him tonight, maybe we need to give pause before we flex him out as a guy in a potential shootout. Maybe it's not the case, and it is Barkley, and it's Eckler, and it's Brian Robinson that dominate tonight. Your thoughts on flexing out Noah Brown on Thursday Night Football, Hasan?
By flexing out, you mean benching him, right? Or putting him in?
No, I'm saying flexing like in the FFPC where you put him as like maybe your second flex this week.
I would much rather not play Noah Brown if I can. He's just sort of, again, like he's had the opportunity. He's coming up at like 6-7 points. It's not necessarily a lot. You can do better, especially in the FFPC, especially given the tight end premium, because there are guys out there that that may not necessarily get you like massive ceiling, but they can get you a decent floor just because you'll get the targets. I'm just checking in one of my leagues, just trying to see who might actually be available there for the tight end, and like you're looking at some not necessarily viable guys. I guess it depends on how TE hungry like your league is, but somehow Dawson Knox is actually on waivers, and given that Kincaid, Kincaid is, I think, dealing with an injury, and also Knox seems to be fine without Kincaid. Like that's actually someone who I'd much rather flex than Noah Brown if I can.
And to your point, Kincaid did not practice again today, so Dawson Knox is looking more and more juicy by the day here.
Yeah, that's actually really frustrating because he cost like a pretty penny in FFPC, and I paid the iron price, right. And that's just like honestly a lot like donating to the pot at that point. Like he's been really, really poor, and if it knocks on the wire, like it just really makes it interesting. I have more interest there, if that makes sense.
It does make sense for sure. I by the way, War Eagle, if you also have Terry McLaurin, then yes, I would definitely play Daniels over Burrow. Mr. Bakes-a-Lot hanging out with us once again. Love to see Mr. Bakes-a-Lot in the chat and YouTube. Noah Brown or John Mechie, a full PPR. John Mechie, we would think relegated to number 3 duties with Houston if Nico Collins does come back, which it seems like he's going to. I lean towards Noah Brown here, who might be the de facto number 2 receiver for Washington. If Mechie's your alternative, then I think that's a case where I would play Brown, Hasan.
100. I'm 100% with you. As we discussed earlier, I think we're both aligned on expecting this to be a Mixon heavy game against the Cowboys, right? Give me the guy in the shoot. In what we're optimistic is going to be a shootout.
Moving forward here, Zach Ertz, we kind of touched on him a little bit. Your thoughts on starting him in a tight end premium league tonight? Obviously, I think you can make a case for a lot of other tight ends at the tight end spot, but if you're getting 1.5 per catch and you're looking at tonight's game as whatever it is in the high 40s, What are your thoughts on Zach Ertz in the FFPC in week 11?
You got to start him. Like, I mean, he's had, I believe, 50% of his games this season has been a TE1 or better, right? I mean, he's been T1, sorry, not better, but like just TE1, right? And he's like averaging about 10.2 FFPC points, which is really, really good for the position. Right? And now he gets like the upside. You probably could look at optimistically 20 points maybe as like his upside case. Like I'm starting him. It's a kind of cool to see old man Ertz just putting together, this magical season with the rookie.
With what do they always say with Jason Witten? He was a dad runner.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just about to say that. He's like he's a very vintage Jason Witten.
Yeah.
Hours.
Which is great because we're seeing a big NFC East showdown tonight. Why not throw in a former NFC East legend in Jason Witten tonight? Let's do this for Mr. Bakes a lot. So we're playing essentially. I know Matthew Berry and Nate Ravitz used to do this on the old ESPN Fantasy Focus podcast. We'll play a name game with Noah Brown. We both said Noah Brown over John Mechie. What about Noah Brown or Ray McLeod, who is at Denver this week? Who would you rather play?
Ooh,
I'm team Noah Brown here.
I think I'm team Noah Brown. I mean, Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts are just enough to like Ray McLeod is not going to be that guy. So no Noah Brown.
You look at Ray McLeod, and not that I want to say like, hey, he should be the guy. But he's caught at least 3 passes in the last 3 weeks. He's gotten in the end zone. So he is being used. I just look at that Denver defense not being a great matchup. So that's why I think I would say Noah Brown in favor of him. And then here's a fun one for Mr. Bakes a lot. What about Noah Brown or Hunter Henry, except tight end premium scoring? Who would you play then? I tip the scales in favor of Hunter Henry. Well, here's the thing. I tip the scales in favor of Hunter Henry. The problem with him is I know he's dealing with an injury right now, and I'm trying to find out what it is. I'm looking it up. Oh, full participant today. Limited on Wednesday, full go for Thursday. Yeah, I'm playing Hunter Henry over Noah Brown in a tight end premium format.
100%. I'm with you. I think Drake May is actually very, very good. And like Hunter Henry seems to be like his like one of the safety blankets, right? So just give me that.
I want to, because we got kickoff in about 5 minutes here. Let's get into the Eagles here real quick and send your starter sit Eagles questions here in the next couple minutes. Hasan and I will do our best to answer them before kickoff. Any qualms about starting Devonta Smith tonight? He was dealing with the hamstring. I just feel like the talent, the offense, the upside, the matchup, it's too juicy to sit Devonta Smith. I guess I have some qualms, but not nearly enough for me to consider benching him.
I guess it depends on who you're actually benching him for, right? Just as a background there, one of my FFPC teams with Blair and Kevin, we actually have Smith. He is firmly on the bench.
Really?
Yeah, firmly on the bench. Unfortunately, we're not playing Jaden Reed either, right? That should give you an idea of how strong this is.
My God. What you have Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson. You have everybody on this. Who are you playing him?
We're playing Jamar Chase and Puka Nacua, Brock Bowers, David Njoku. Someone actually dropped David Njoku 2 waivers and we picked him up. And George Pickens.
So the Pickens would be the one where yeah, I mean
it's tough to say Pickens, right? And then,
you have Jaden Reed on the bench, you have Devonta Smith on the bench in favor of George Pickens, who is that's that big Baltimore game. And Baltimore, they've been giving up a lot of yardage. Okay, I can see it that you would play Pickens over him. All right, yeah. I'm on board for sure.
So yeah, I think that's where like the Devonta Smith question is like who do you reliably have that can provide you like the similar upside without that downside risk of because of the injury, right?
Right. Oh my God, the Noah Brown. We can't get away from Noah Brown. And Noah Brown is just lighting up the YouTube chat right now. Jimmy Williams, my good buddy from the KFFSC. Noah Brown, Austin Eckler, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. If I had to rank them, I would rank them this week only. Eckler, Valdez-Scantling, Noah Brown. That's how I'd have them there for you, Jimmy. Hasan, how would you have them?
100% the same. I think it's like a no contest. I'd rather have Eckler than everybody else there.
Paul and Boats on YouTube. This is an interesting one because we don't exactly know the status of T. Higgins. We think he's going to play, but we don't know for sure. What if you had to make a decision tonight, starting Noah Brown or waiting and hoping T. Higgins is out and playing Mike Gesicki?
Oh yeah, I might just wait and see if Higgins is out and play to Gesicki. I could probably scramble and find another option on the Sunday waiver run to replace Brown, right?
That's a good point. Yeah. So I think like for you, Paul and Boats, I'm with Hasan on this. I think, yeah, I mean, Noah Brown would be the better start, but hopefully you can find something not even necessarily better than Noah Brown, but just something similar, just so you can wait out this Higgins Gesicki thing a little bit longer. And maybe Permar has some inside info on T. Higgins this week. Permar, I'd love it if you posted something because you always seem to have nuggets like this going forward here. Dallas Goedert, is he truly good to go? Because Sky MD on YouTube wants to know, should he play him or Tucker Kraft this week?
Ooh, man.
Tucker Kraft, obviously, on the road against Chicago. Dallas Goedert tonight at home against the Commanders.
Yeah, that's such a tough one, right? Because I always instinctively lean towards Goddard here, especially because Kraft has he does need those touchdowns. Dobbs is coming on. Josh Jacobs is probably going to be the one that's going to take the axe to the Bears, right? And this is a potential shootout game. I might just roll with Goddard, right? Because there's just too much. There's too many red zone, I guess, or end zone threats to Kraft's value this week, I feel.
Paul and Boats, just to piggyback on this Brown or Gesicki, if you have Odunze on the bench, then sit Noah Brown and wait to see what happens with Higgins and then play Odunze.
I would just play Odunze.
Just in general?
Yeah, I mean, he's getting a lot of the targets. And if they're playing from behind against the Packers, that you might get some prevent defense looks, and Odunze might get to 11 or 12 points, right?
Just not that I know we're flipping back and forth kind of rapid fire here. Goddard 2 for 25 last week. He gets his first touchdown on the season, only on 3 targets. I am on board with Kraft over Goddard this week. I would sit Goddard tonight. I think he's truly good to go. I don't think he's going to be in a snap limit. However, Grant Calcaterra is a guy that I know a lot of FFPC players like. We've seen flashes from him, and it's not like he is that big of a detriment at the tight end position that you have to have Goddard out there all the time. So there's something to consider or there's something to consider there too as well. And then the last thing I'll bring up here, the Philly defense. Can you trust them tonight against the Commanders? Philly at home against Washington. We know Jaden Daniels can light it up. We know McLaurin's an explosive player. We know their ground game. I'm actually starting the Eagles defense in 2 of my leagues this week. I feel okay about it, but not great.
I don't mind it, right? One of the things is if you don't have any elite defense options, I like playing the defenses in these high-powered shootouts and hoping for a pick or two, right? If the game shoots out, that just creates potential opportunities for cornerbacks to pick off the pass, right? Hopefully you can back into a pick six, right? It's why I'm playing Washington defense in 3 must-win matchups right now, just because I'm hoping that I can get an edge from the defensive position.
And we'll see what happens tonight. Certainly, I think when the offenses come out and the ball is flying all over the field, the defenses can sometimes get in the action on that. That's what I'm hoping for the Eagles. So I do think they are a sneaky defensive play tonight. Let's get into our weekly challenge week 11 lineup tonight. As a reminder, you too can play the FFPC weekly challenge by going to myffpc.com. That's myffpc.com. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. You choose the 10 or 12 players you want to play. If you want to play with kickers and defenses, it's 12. If you want to play without, it's 10. Watch them ride throughout the weekend's games. Remember, you can't stack in this format. You can only choose 1 player per NFL team. If you want Jalen Hurts, you can't have Devonta Smith. If you want Jaden Daniels, you can't have Terry McLaurin. $35 or $200 to enter. You can win up to $2,500. 10, 30, or 100 team contests available now at myffpc.com. That's myffpc.com. Let's build a lineup here tonight. Actually, before we do that, I have to answer our YouTube questions because we love our viewers here at the Better Sports Network. Jimmy Williams wants to know, would you play the Eagles defense over the Bears defense against the Packers this week? For me, that's a yes.
Over the Packers defense?
Excuse me. The Eagles defense over the Bears defense against the Packers. I would rather play.
Easy.
If I had to rank them, I go Packers, Eagles, Bears.
I would much rather have the Packers. I've been trying to get them if they were available.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to have Philly.
And then Sky MD, Cortland Sutton or Jennings. What Jennings would that be?
Yeah, Juwan Jennings. I have no interest in
Juwan Jennings.
I'd probably have Sutton.
Yeah, I would have Sutton over Jennings as well. That's
Ricky Pearsall's been coming on. CMC takes up a lot of targets. I'd much rather have Sutton.
I think eventually Pearsall could be the guy, but it's not going to happen until December. Juwan Jennings put out like 50 points a few weeks ago, so that's still looming large in my mind. Okay, let's do this. Let's build because we're up against it. We'll fly through this as best we can, Hasan. We're going to build a lineup tonight featuring no kicker, no defense. So it's going to be a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, 4 flexes, tight end premium scoring. I always leave it up to the guest. I'm happy to be the guide, but I always leave it up to the guest. Where would you like to start? Is there a game or is there a player you want to make sure we get in this lineup tonight?
Why don't you start? Because I want to see if I can build off of you. I want to know where your head's at before I make a pick.
So in the past, people have come on and they say, I like to start with the quarterback, which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I particularly like to attack the games with the highest total and figure out which players, I want from those games. Now we're going to skip the Commanders-Eagles game tonight because that's already started. So let's look at some of these other higher total games. We talked about that Cincinnati-Los Angeles game, focusing on the Chargers. I think that the Chargers is too difficult to figure out with, Edwards and Dobbins and Herbert. I think Herbert's a nice pivot. I'm not willing to do that yet, but let's focus in on the Bengals. A guy who's coming off a 50-plus point week and a guy that can take advantage of the Chargers defense, a guy that we can start, even if he takes up one of the receiver spots, we still could start up to 5 more receivers after that. I like the idea of having Jamar Chase on this team. We don't have to worry about the question marks with Gesicki or Higgins, because of the Higgins injury. We just lock in Jamar Chase. I like the idea of starting with Jamar Chase here.
Yeah, I'm 100% there with you. Like, that's a really good pick. Let's lock it in.
All right, so Jamar Chase will be leading things off. He is our number 1 receiver on this team. We can fly over to the Seahawks-Niners game. I want to get your opinion on this because I think we could look at Ken Walker. We could look at Jackson Smith and Jigba as another receiver. But the guy I want to start off with is a player that I think might be under-owned because in his debut last week, McCaffrey didn't light the world on fire. But I think that makes him a less chalky pick. It makes him more desirable if we're trying to win something here this week. I would put Christian McCaffrey as our 49er this week. Yeah,
and that was and just for transparency, that was who I was going to pick if I picked first. So
perfect. So we are of one mind there. McCaffrey joins Jamar Chase on this team. The Seahawks are plus 6.5. DK Metcalf did practice in full today. Do you have any thoughts on JSN, Metcalf, anything there for Seattle?
So that was actually where I was going to go with that is you want to run it back with DKM, right? Because practice in full, he's, clearly the guy there when healthy. Like, I'd rather just kind of want him in, right? CMC and run it back with DKM. That was exactly where I was going with that when I was planning.
They're complementary players too, right? Mm-hmm. With the Niners, a touchdown favorite, it should be a McCaffrey game, and quite frankly, it should be a Metcalf game. Okay, so we got Metcalf as the other starting receiver opposed to Jamar Chase. What about this Lions game? The total on this is 47, but the Lions are 14-point favorites. Is David Montgomery actually a sneaky start here? Your thoughts here on what Lion we should pick?
That was actually you're reading my mind. I don't know how.
Oh, great minds, Hasan. We are dialed in, man.
But I was gonna ask is like in a larger field type of setting, Montgomery feels like the pivot, right? Over Gibbs.
I think if you're playing in a 10 team, because you could play the FFPC Weekly Challenge in a 10 team, 30 team, or 100 team. If we're doing a 100 team, I think it's David Montgomery over Gibbs here. Montgomery, I could easily see. I mean, if you told me right now that Montgomery is going to have a 3-touchdown week, I wouldn't even bat an eye. Like, that would make perfect sense to me that he does that against Jacksonville. You want to lock him in?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, it feels like, and that's kind of like kind of when you're playing these tournaments, I feel like that's kind of what you want, right? Like shooting for the upside, but like in a smart way.
In a smart way, and I think Montgomery is a smart pick this week in this format. Okay, we have not touched the Ravens and the Steelers game yet. Over the course of time, it always seemed like this was a low-scoring game, yet both defenses have been underwhelming, in part because Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson have these offenses running pretty hot. You mentioned how you are benching Jaden Reed, and who's the other receiver that you said you were benching? Devonta Smith.
Devonta Smith.
In favor of George Pickens. You think George Pickens has a spot on this roster here for Pittsburgh?
I think so.
I'm still a little worried about Jaylen Warren having a full practice tomorrow and then kind of, for all intents and purposes, neutering Najee Harris. But if we put George Pickens on this team, I think that looks pretty good.
I think it does as well. And I want to get your take. Like, again, as we're looking at this from like a larger field perspective, do you think bringing that game back with Mark Andrews sounds exciting?
Ooh, it does actually. Because I think a lot of people would have Lamar Jackson, obviously, or Derrick Henry. If we throw in Mark Andrews as our tight end, Mark Andrews, let me just look at this here real quick. Mark Andrews last week, I know this is Thursday Night Football against the Bengals. He ended up going 6 for 68 and a touchdown. That was a season high for catches. It was a season high for yardage. Wasn't a season high for touchdowns because he had 2 against Tampa. But I love Mark Andrews here. So let's do that. We'll put in Mark Andrews as our tight end, right? And then we'll put in George Pickens as our first flex here. And we are locked and loaded and all set for that shootout, that AFC North shootout between the Ravens and the Steelers. That's coming up at 1:00 on Sunday. Okay. What other games do we need to attack here? We could look at Cleveland, New Orleans.
We can go to Chiefs, Bills.
Oh, yeah, perfect. That's even better. Let's do that. So Chiefs, Bills, total on that's 46. Buffalo, a 2-point favorite. We don't have a quarterback yet. There are a couple of candidates here. Is that the way you're leaning?
Yeah, I was thinking, and you can pull me back if you think I'm thinking about this the wrong way. But we go Travis Kelce in the flex, and you're running back with Josh Allen right at the top.
Totally on board with that. So many times
you can go jockey there because we've got some of the pivots, right?
We do have the pivots already with Pickens and Andrews, Montgomery. So many times when I put this lineup together with who's ever co-hosting the show with me, I don't think we've ever had 2 tight ends before. And I always kind of look at it like at the end, I'm like, this is a good team, but man, I would have loved to see a second tight end in there. We have a second tight end in there in Travis Kelce, a guy who quite frankly has been a little bit underwhelming as far as the explosive plays, but these little dink and dunk things, how many times have we seen it this year where Patrick Mahomes is under pressure? He buys time, and he just pitches it forward to Kelce for like 6 yards, and Kelce just falls down. It's the most unathletic play ever, and yet it still counts for fantasy. I'm on board for that. Let's do that.
If anyone's copying along the lineup or like wants to kind of pivot off what we're doing, just swap in Nuke. It's a pretty easy.
Yeah. That would work too.
Very easy. Like I think it's an easy 1-to-1 pivot.
Okay. So we got our Chief, we got our Bill with Josh Allen at quarterback, Travis Kelce at tight end. We have 2 flexes left. I'm going to throw out some games here that we haven't touched, or maybe we have and we haven't done anything with it. The Chargers are 1.5-point favorites at home against Cincinnati. We have the Broncos 2-point favorites at home against the Falcons, total of 44 in that game. Jets and Colts, that's a 43.5. We already got our Lions, so we can stay away from that one.
We have an open running back spot, right?
Yeah, we got 2 flexes, so we can do whatever the hell we want here, Hasan.
What are your thoughts on Bijan?
Bijan Robinson this week is facing the Broncos on the road, 2-point dog, 44. You know what's interesting about this is I don't love it. However, in this format, as I can tell you, give you an update, son of a gun, Jake Elliott has just missed a field goal on the opening drive. It looks like a 51-yarder. He misses it wide left. So the Eagles fail to capitalize on the opening drive, 0-0 as Amazon Prime goes to commercial, 9:55 to go in the first quarter, no score. In this format, you want elite talent. You want guys that are touching the ball a lot, and we don't have to worry about them getting hurt because it's a 1-week thing. So I don't love it. However, I really can't argue with the volume. I can't argue with the talent. This is one of the most elite guys out there, and he's primed for the taking. If you like Bijan Robinson, I would have no problems with him.
But I want to weigh that against Kyren Williams against the Patriots.
Well, we could do both. I mean, that's the thing. We could play, or we could throw in Achane against the Raiders because
I was thinking Achane. Like I was just trying to go. Like I was going. Like those are the 3 guys cycling through my mind. I wanted to get your take in like a pick 2 type of situation, right?
All right, hold on. Not to make this more difficult, let me expand this a little bit more. We don't have a Texan. We got Joe Mixon big favorites against the Cowboys. We have Mixon out there. We have Alvin Kamara, who's been catching passes like it's a bodily function for New Orleans against Cleveland. Not the greatest matchup, but that's okay if his value is in catching passes. He's out there as well. So let's do 2 running backs here.
Mm-hmm.
But whether it's Mixon, whether it's Kamara, whether it's Achane, whether it's Bijan Robinson, quite frankly, I'm a little torn here.
I kind of would. I'm kind of with you on like fading Bijan. I might prefer Mixon there. We talked at the top like just about like how this feels like sets up really nicely for Mixon.
Yeah. And
it kind of feels nice to like have who, or at least we're putting our chips in on who we assume is the Monday Night Hammer, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm just thinking about Mixon and Robinson. I think we're making the right choice with Mixon.
Yeah, with Mixon, and I think you put him in the flex.
Yeah, he'll be in the flex.
Because then that way, if we're behind, we could potentially swap him out for Nico.
No, we can't because in this format, everything locks at.
Sorry, I'm confusing my formats.
That's okay. That's okay.
Too many sites.
It's the right idea. Hasan Rahim, ladies and gentlemen, always thinking outside the box, which is what we like here. No, I'm with. I still think it's Mixon. I still think it's.
I think I'd much rather have Mixon here.
Okay, so let's do Mixon, and then that leaves one spot for 3 running backs: Achane against the Raiders, Kamara against the Browns, and who's the other one I just said? Robinson at Denver. Robinson's on the road. The other 2 guys are at home. Not that is a huge differentiation, but between Kamara, Achane, and Robinson, who are we going with our last spot?
Kamara, Achane, and Robinson. No interest in Kyren Williams? Or did we put
I forgot about Kyren Williams. Yeah, Kyren Williams I would have interest in as well. Kyren Williams, he is on the road against New England.
Yeah, that's...
Oh, God, so we got 4 running backs for 1 spot?
Yeah, that's like the issue there, right? Oh man. So like I guess this is a good thing. I want to get your take on this. Is Mostert's usage gonna shrink? Because if you think that's like, I think that's what's preventing me from thinking about Achane here. Okay,
Mostert's his usage is shrinking, but it's at the hands of Jalen Wright, not necessarily Devon Achane.
Oh, I just realized something. Josh Jacobs. We didn't even think of him.
Oh, we didn't think about Jacobs. God, okay.
Man, that's what makes this season so hard is that there's like legitimately 20 RB1 candidates every week.
Yeah, you're right.
It's like you can build the whole plane out of running backs, and like I wouldn't flinch. You know what I mean?
Okay, hold on. So let's do this. Do we like Pickens better than those running backs? Could we take Pickens out in favor of one of those running backs?
I think Pickens
or Metcalf. We could take Metcalf out too.
Well, I kind of like having that shootout, but I think Pickens might be the removal. And do you think it makes sense to just straight up fade Montgomery because he's in a timeshare and go with some of these guys with more established work?
Yep. Okay, you're selling me on this. I'm taking Montgomery out. I'm taking Pickens out. Okay. So now we have opened up 3 spots. We have 3 spots open for all those running backs. And those running backs are Kamara, Achane, Bijan Robinson, Kyren Williams, and Josh Jacobs. So now it almost seems palatable. I like the idea of having Achane in there.
I think I'm with you. I think Achane is like he's got ridiculous upside.
I mean, if we're entering this in a 100 team contest, I mean, Achane is especially when you consider all these other high volume running backs. Achane is going to catch passes. I don't think he's threatened by Mostert or Wright. So yeah, let's put him in. Now we got 2 spots. You keep hyping up Kyren Williams, and quite frankly, I think you've turned me on to him. Let's throw in Kyren Williams as one of our flexes.
And do you want to run back the other? No, well, if you put Kyren Williams in running back, we can run back that Miami game with Brock Bowers and call it a day.
Run back the Miami game and put Brock Bowers in. So we'd have
3 tight end lineup.
3 tight. Yep, I love it. If for no other reason that this is going to be fun to watch on Sunday. So that's what we'll do. So I got it. So here's what we're doing. Okay. And we're way behind it. I apologize. The lineup that Hasan Rahim from RotoViz and I have put together for the weekly challenge. Quarterback is Josh Allen. The running backs are Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane, Kyren Williams, and Joe Mixon. The receivers are Jamar Chase and DK Metcalf. And the tight ends are Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, and Brock Bowers. I don't know if this is the best lineup we've put together on this show, Hasan. It is 100% by far and away my favorite lineup that we've put together on this show over the course of the season. You can definitely enter it, viewers, if you want, when you play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. MyFFPC.com, MyFFPC.com. No draft, no salary cap. Just choose the 10 or 12 players if you want to play with kickers and defenses. Watch them ride through the weekend's games. No stacking. Only one player per team. Enter for as little as $35. Win up to $2,500. 10, 30, and 100 team contest. We advise this for a 100 team contest, but you can enter it in whatever division you'd like to do. Go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com. The Commanders have gone 3-0. It is a timeout in Thursday Night Football, 8:40 to go in the first. The Eagles now have it at their own 9-yard line. They're taking a break. We'll take a break too. When we come back, plenty of start or sit questions answered with Hasan Rahim from RotoViz, the Fantasy Football Report co-host. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour on the Better Sports Network. We roll on for our final segment right after this.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there.
Mm-hmm.
And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl.
And
when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, yeah, well, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would.
But
yeah.
Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game.
Yeah.
That they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman, and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, like, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky, is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yards go.
25 minutes until the top of the hour. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and of course the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. He is Hasan Rahim, from the Fantasy Football Report over at RotoViz. Follow him on the X at HRR5010. Where'd you come up with that X handle, Hasan?
Oh, I just started way back when I was in college. It was like an acronym given to us back when we were like at our email address. I didn't know what it was. I just jammed it in there.
And it works. It definitely works for sure. We have gotten through a lot of stuff on the show tonight. We've put together a fantasy football lineup for the FFPC Weekly Challenge. We've gotten through all the news around the NFL, as well as our Thursday night preview. Still no score in that game, that Commanders-Eagles game. Let's get into some start sits here before we have to sign off at the top of the hour. I want to start with running backs here. And I want to bring up Nick Chubb, who is going up against the New Orleans Saints this week, or the freshly named RB1, the bell cow in Dallas, according to Mike McCarthy today, Rico Dowdle. You can only play one of these guys, Chubb at New Orleans or Rico Dowdle at home against the Texans. Which one are you playing this week?
Man, that's really tough because I feel like I haven't really paid too much attention to Cleveland, but has Chubb's workload, it's kind of been non-existent just in terms of like value, right? Like he's really putting together point totals that just make you feel kind of sad and dead inside. And I don't know if it's going to get any better. I'd rather have Dowdle because he looks kind of like the explosive player, gets the targets. Like I just think that I'd much rather have Dowdle at least until we see some signs of life of efficiency from Chubb.
11 for 22, 16 for 52, 15 for 39. Those are the rushing totals for Nick Chubb in his first 3 games back off that horrific knee injury last year. He has found the end zone once. He's also got, and I'm not making this up, he's got 2 catches. Oh, no, I guess it's not that bad. 2 catches for 6 yards. First game, he had a catch for 10 yards. Nothing in his second game. 1 catch for -4 in his last game. Dowdle, I think that you look at what he's been able to do, and now that he is the starter for Dallas, I think you can look at more exciting stuff from him. Keep in mind, against the Eagles last week, a game that was a negative game script for Dowdle, he still churned out 53 yards on 12 touches. He caught 3 passes as well. Even when it was super bad for Dowdle, he still put up darn near close to double-digit fantasy points. So I think I'm with you. I think it's Dowdle over Chubb this week. Audric Estime, the darling for the FFPC waiver wire, if he was available in your waiver wire this past week, he is going to be getting the Falcons at home this week. And then you have Alexander Mattison, who we talked about a little bit earlier. Mattison is all the way over on the other side of the country against the Dolphins. Who would you rather play, Mattison or Estime this week? For what it's worth, I lean towards Estime here.
I'm with you on this as well. Just because I know, like my co-host Blair Andrews has, Estime was actually one of his like pre-draft favorite darlings. Like when during the rookie kind of scouting phase, he was still a fan of Estime like the whole time, and like it was a mixed bag in terms of an RBBC there. But I'd much rather like work with Estime, who seems to have potentially fully usurped Javonte Williams as the through the tackles guy, and I think that's a better game environment, at least for Estime, just for scoring. So give me Estime, man.
Estime missed a lot of time after week 1. He gets hurt in week 1. He doesn't come back till week 6. 2 carries, 5 carries, 1 carry, 5 carries, and then last week, after Sean Payton said Estime was going to be more involved in the offense, 14 carries for 53 yards. He touched the ball more than Javonte Williams, more than Jaleel McLaughlin, more than all the other, running backs in that backfield. Payton has this season talked about getting running backs more involved in the game and not following through on it. He did follow through on it with Estime. Estime was a guy, to your point of what Blair Andrews was saying too. He sucked with his 40 at the combine, and it fairly or unfairly dragged him down. He had a better one at his pro day, and I feel like you got him at a discount in part because of that. Now you had to pay through the teeth if he was out there on your waiver wire this week. You probably paid a little bit for him last week too, and now he gets the Falcons, the Raiders next week. This could be a good thing for Estime going forward, at least for the second half of the season. I'm playing Estime over Mattison as well. We talked earlier about J.K. Dobbins. I don't know if we hit too much on Travis Etienne. I think we did a little bit, but if you had the opportunity to only play one of these guys, to flex one of these guys out in an FFPC league this week, Hasan, would you play Dobbins at home against the Bengals, or would you rather play Travis Etienne on the road against Detroit?
Man, Dobbins all day and twice on Sunday, right? Like Etienne, like really the issue there is I really don't know what to expect from Mac Jones-led offense on the road against Detroit, right? Like I have to play Etienne because I have to, because I just don't have it. Like, I can't play Dalvin Cook, right? Like, but that's like my mistake, and I gotta live with it. If I had Dobbins, easy decision, right?
So the other thing too that we could bring up is Etienne actually, I don't want to say he's matchup proof against Detroit, but is he actually a little bit more palatable because he might be catching some stuff out of the backfield for Mac Jones when Mac Jones is probably going to have to drop back a lot to hang in this game? They hung in the game last week quite a bit against Minnesota. I can't see them doing that 2 weeks in a row.
I cannot, and I believe like, if we see all you need is like them to like give more Tank, like again, just to like flip the switch, like Tank Bigsby again, or like he or ETN re-aggravate something. I just can't do it. And Brian Robinson just scored a touchdown.
I was just going to say that, yeah. So Brian Robinson has an 18-yard carry all the way down to the 1, and then he comes in and scores from 1 yard out to put the Commanders up 6-0. The Zane Gonzalez extra point is now good. 7-0 Commanders, 3:26 to go in the first quarter as Prime heads for a break. But we're not. We're going to keep going on this. ETN versus Dobbins. ETN's an interesting guy against the Lions this week, man.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with like ETN is like I've always been like a big I'll be honest, like I'm like a really big believer in the sound. Like I think of the like secretly I'm a big Aaron Jones guy and a big Travis Etienne guy. Like these are like two guys because I just like I like watching them. They're aesthetically pleasing running backs when they're when they're on. But like just looking at like I'm looking at the Gillespie right now, it gives the median projection for ETN is 6 PPR points, and the median projection for J.K. Dobbins is 13. Right, like it's such a gulf that like and even when you look at the 25th percentile, it's like Dobbins' floor is much higher. Like I just much rather have the guy in that shootout against the Bengals, right, at home.
And we have to keep in mind, like to your point, we have to keep in mind the type of game that it could be. So, yeah, I'm with you. Shifting to receivers. Now, this first one, we have talked a lot about both these players tonight, but we've never pitted them against each other. Tank Dell, who is going up against the Dallas Cowboys on the road at Jerry World. Hopefully they have the curtains up. Just kidding. They probably won't. Or Khalil Shakir, who is going to be going up against the Chiefs in that potential shootout Sunday afternoon in the late game window. Which one would you play this week? Assume full PPR here, FFPC scoring. Shakir or Dell?
I'd probably play Shakir, right?
Yeah.
Like Kincaid potentially out. Good explosive game environment. And we're both, I believe we're both expecting this to be more mix and heavy game plan, right? Like I think Shakir might be the move, especially because I can't recall who it was. They mentioned that he's PPR gold. Like we've already got the Cole Beasley comparisons.
Oh, that was Jake Venuti posted that earlier. Yes.
Right. And so like just making sure that just I don't know, just give me Shakir, especially with Kincaid gone. Like if Kincaid definitely doesn't play, then Shakir could be in line for at least a pretty solid day, right?
I mean, Shakir, even if let's say Kincaid's even active, Shakir could still be the number one pass catcher for Buffalo in that game. I mean, I guess if Cooper plays, and it sounds like he's going to, but Tank Dell, where is he? I mean, he's behind Collins. He might be behind Schultz. He might even be behind Nick Mixon in that game too. So
I think he's definitely behind Mixon on that game for sure.
Let's assume Cooper plays. Would you play Cooper over Jerry Jeudy this week? Jerry Jeudy facing the Saints. Obviously, Amari Cooper in that Chiefs game.
Yeah, and I think this one actually gets kind of interesting, right? Like, because I guess like I'd much rather have Amari if we know he's going,
right?
Because I think Jerry Jeudy is in the same path as Amari of like I don't know if he's good.
It's a 1:00 game too for the Browns. So and we, I mean, depending upon Schefter and Rappaport's reporting, we may know or have a pretty strong feeling of whether Cooper's going to go. And I think he's going to go.
I think he's going to go.
But we won't know for sure, to your point, when we have to lock in Jeudy or sit him on the bench.
Yeah, and I think if we can get it, like, I don't know, like I think I'd much rather have Amari just in general, like assuming full health, still go. Like I'm just like optimistic that they might give him a little bit. I'm still expecting Shakir to pace the team in targets. But, like I just think that there's more upside for Cooper against the Chiefs than it would be Jeudy, right? Because I think Jeudy still has get target competition against Njoku, Tillman, right? So I think I'd much rather have Amari.
So what if I throw this at you? Let's say it comes out Sunday morning reporting from big media, Schefter, Rappaport. They say Cooper is a true game time decision at 4:25. What do you do then? Are you taking the locked in, hey, I know Judy's playing, I'm going to play him, or are you rolling the dice with Cooper?
I'm absolutely just going to play Jeudy at that point because you don't know what's going to happen with Amari. Typically, he plays through injury, and when he does play through injury, he's straight up decoy territory.
The Bears are 5.5-point home dogs to the Green Bay Packers in a total of 40.5. We know that we are playing DJ Moore as the primary receiver for the Bears in that game. But if you have to make a choice on the secondary receiver, who is it going to be? Is it going to be Keenan Allen or is it going to be Rome Odunze? Hasan, I think based on what you said earlier in the show, you're playing Odunze all day here.
Yeah, I think I am, just because, I mean, I don't know what the Bears' offense is, but calling it like
we don't know that new offensive coordinator this week. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. Like, and I think that their season is so far gone that like pushing the chips in and getting Keenan Allen and giving the veteran run in a very much a dead season, like this doesn't seem like it would be like a good use of resources for a new OC. Optimistically, he'd prioritize Odunze. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but like you got to see what you got, man. Like it would, it would be very sad if the Bears missed on both of their first round picks, right? Like I don't know if Odunze was worth the cost versus BTJ, for example, right? Like, who would you rather have, BTJ or Odunze, right?
Well, I mean, we throw in the injury aspect of Thomas this week, and it becomes even more muddied, right?
Yeah, but I mean, just in the macro, like long
term.
Oh,
yeah,
right?
I totally get it from that standpoint for sure.
Yeah. And so just one of those things. I think I'd rather have Odunze this week, and I'm not expecting him to be like anything great, but like I think they should sort of sunset Keenan's role a little bit. Give the younger guys run.
I think they already have been sunsetting it. You know what I mean? Like I think the only two relevant guys catching passes on this team are Odunze and Moore. Maybe to a certain point, Swift, but Kmet is like non-existent. Keenan Allen is like a tertiary option at this point. Like I don't really see. You could make the case, especially with 6 teams coming on bye this week. It might feel weird to cut Keenan Allen, but optimally, when are you ever going to play this guy? I mean, what's the upside with Keenan Allen at this point? I think if you drafted him, you've been fortunate to have him for bench depth, but he's not winning you any leagues this year. So yeah, I mean, going forward, it's Odunze's show, it's DJ Moore's show, and we'll see what happens there. 5 for 104 for Odunze 2 weeks ago at Arizona. Maybe he continues that against the Packers this week. Focusing in on the tight ends here, we'll move on. Again, we've talked about a couple of these guys, or both these guys in the first one. I'll throw it at you again. Mike Gesicki or Hunter Henry. Does this simply come down to whether Higgins is playing or not? Like if Higgins is active, we're playing Hunter Henry. If Higgins is inactive, we're playing Gesicki.
I think that's pretty much it. It's a very binary decision for me.
Yeah.
And I think you just hit it right, like the nail right in the head there.
I just want to verify here. The Bengals are playing at they are the Sunday night game.
Yeah,
so we may not know about Higgins until late in the afternoon. And then Hunter Henry play. I guess it's a thing where we don't even mess around with it, especially if Higgins practices tomorrow. We're playing Hunter Henry, right?
Yeah, I think I think you just figure it out. You just got to make that decision now because it's been a while since we've seen him, and I'd rather just play Henry. Right, Gesicki, if you know that if there's an inkling of Higgins not being in there. There
is a tight end that has come on this year for the Los Angeles Chargers, and his name is Will Dissly. Will Dissly, out of his last 4 weeks, 3 of them, he's had at least 5 catches or more. Will Dissly against the Cardinals in Week 7, 8 for 81. Against the Saints, in Week 8, 5 for 41. Against the Titans last week, 5 for 30. Has not found the end zone yet this year, but a guy that I really should be paying more attention to in tight end premium leagues than I haven't. When you pit him against Jake Ferguson this week, who is going against the Texans in a positive game script, but a positive game script featuring one or both of Cooper Rush and Trey Lance, is Dissly doing enough for you right now to say, he's my guy over Ferguson this week?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think I'm with you there. Yeah, like
you don't even think about it.
No, like I'm probably one of the bigger Trey Lance detractors out there. I just thought he was wildly overdrafted and hasn't really shown much, if anything, as an NFL starter. It really brings like question marks as to why he was like drafted so highly. And
why the Cowboys gave up a 4th-round pick.
Well, the Cowboys give up 4th rounders for nothing, right? Like they just doing whatever.
Right.
But like Trey Lance, everyone keeps saying he's got so much potential, and like he does as like potentially playing in NFL Europe as a backup quarterback. Right, like he could play.
That's his potential. Yeah, that's his potential.
Yeah, that's
like
like
the UFL MVP. That is his potential at this point.
He's shown nothing from like an NFL standpoint, and it's like it's sad. I feel bad for the people who backed him, but I just don't think he's like the guy. Right, like this, like it's kind of telling that they're giving Cooper Rush all this work ahead of Trey Lance.
Right,
like they probably see Trey Lance in practice, and like it just I don't know. I don't really get the warm and fuzzies from this Dallas Cowboys offense. And like, I feel bad for like all the folks who were like smashing with CeeDee Lamb because like now you're dealing with this.
No, it's awful. I mean, it's just all the whole Cowboys offense, and it's just terrible. This next one, the last one I'm going to do for tight ends here. I guess this is kind of only pertinent if Dalton Kincaid misses, and that is a late game window. So again, we're playing with fire here a little bit. Dawson Knox or Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith, one of the speediest tight ends in the NFL. He has found him a good spot to play on in the Dolphins where they feature speed. Your thoughts? Let's say Kincaid is out. Would you rather play Dawson Knox against the Chiefs over Jonnu Smith this week against the Raiders?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I think I might just play Jonnu Smith just because he's like clearly carved out a pretty aggressive role for himself on that offense. You really just want like the touchdown equity, I guess, from him. Like they do, and he's, as you mentioned, like he's not going away, man. Like he's done like a lot this season, even with 2 out back under center. And he's not just sort of a Skylar Thompson merchant. What is giving me pause, and I wanted to pick your brain on this, is how much of this is going to be the running show via Achane? Because that's going to like decide, like that's my decision point.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here is and Permar 99 has brought this to my attention over the last month or so. Even when Tunga Vailoa came back and took the reins of these offense back from Huntley, they are still featuring a lot of stuff from the running backs and the tight ends. And the receivers are paying the price. Now, I know Waddle got involved early in that game. Whenever it was that the Sunday night game or the Monday night game? That was a Monday night game against the Rams, right?
Yeah, it was a Monday night game.
Right. Waddle got involved early. Obviously, Tyreek Hill got the touchdown, but you're not seeing the capital letters, Jalen Waddle, the capital letters, Tyreek Hill, that we saw at the start of the year. So I think even if Achane and Mostert and Jalen Wright are controlling the ground game, I still think Jonnu Smith is involved. Now, the Dolphins play this week. The time for them is 1:00. So if it comes down to it and Kincaid's a game time decision, I'm going to take Jonnu Smith here, and I'm not going to roll the dice with Knox late. And I'll feel good about it. 7-point favorite. I think Jonnu Smith figures into the game plan. I don't want to say he's game script proof, but he's fairly close because I don't think he's utilized that much more in winning games as opposed to losing games. So that's how I'd fall in on this one. If we get word that Kincaid doesn't practice tomorrow and he's listed as out, then I'm firing up Dawson Knox.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I'd handle it. How much time we got? We got a few minutes left. Let's go rapid fire on these quarterbacks here.
All right.
We may have talked about, I know we talked about both these guys. I don't know if we pitted them against each other. Burrow or Herbert. I think I'm leaning towards Burrow here, but it's very, very close.
It's close, but Burrow again, if Chase just maintains any, like there's like more paths to Burrow hitting his ceiling than Herbert. I'd give me Burrow.
Burrow is the choice here. By the way, that Sunday night game or the Thursday night game. God, I don't know what's going on. The Thursday night game has gone to the second quarter, or the first quarter just ended. They've gone to a break on Amazon Prime. 7-0 Washington. The Eagles do have the ball inside Washington territory, 2nd and 3 at the 41. Our producer, Matt Deutsch, watching this game while he produces our show. God, how talented is he? He says the Commanders are the more physical team tonight. They are bullying the Eagles. We'll see if that continues going forward. Austin Eckler already 3 catches for 37 yards. A.J. Brown 2 for 32. Barkley 7 for 27. Robinson has the 20 yards rushing and the touchdown. Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts both have not topped 50 yards passing yet. We'll keep it right here for the duration of the show. Or excuse me, obviously we're going to keep it right here for the duration of the show. We keep it right here for the next few minutes, and then we'll let you watch the Thursday night game. Jordan Love or Bo Nix. This is a closer one than it probably appears on the surface. Jordan Love in a game where the Packers ground game, Jacobs and Wilson could take over at Soldier Field. Would you play him or would you play Bo Nix, who's really been coming on in recent weeks? And then Bo Nix this week gets the Falcons at home. I love both these guys. I lean towards Love, but it's very close.
Yeah, man, it's really thin because Love on paper has like a bad matchup, but we've seen him shred bad matchups, like with 4 TDs. You know what I mean?
And I'll say this too, Hasan, not to interrupt you. I found out today that this will be the first week all season since prior to the season starting, when the Packers are prepping for the Eagles. This will be the first game all season, or the first week all season, that Jordan Love will have taken all the starters reps in practice. He's been limited in since the knee injury in week 1, the groin injury a few weeks ago. He is fully good to go and taking all the starters reps this week.
Yeah, and that's again we've seen. I mean, again, we've seen Love do it, right? In worse, in more negative matchups, and we just cannot truly predict script. Give me Love, but to your point, it is close, very very close. Like it's like if you're a dog and you need the points, I would probably roll Bo Nix if you had this actual choice, but give me Love.
I look at I don't know what the totals on these games are. I just feel like there's a higher potential for bigger scoring in that Packers-Bears game than that Broncos game. So I'm going to take Love as well. Final one of the night. This is a fun one. I'm a weak man. I am not strong enough to start Russell Wilson against the Ravens over Patrick Mahomes, who is taking on the Bills this week. You might be. I'm still going Mahomes over Wilson, even though Wilson has a good matchup this week and has been playing very well.
I have absolutely no interest in Wilson.
So easy decision. So easy decision. And that's how we'll wrap it up tonight. Hasan Rahim, the voice, or one of the voices, I should say, of the Fantasy Football Report, which you can check out rotoviz.com/podcast or anywhere you get podcasts, at HRR5010 on the X and on Blue Sky. I should point that out as well. The best way to consume your content, following you on X, following you on Blue Sky, and then obviously just checking that RotoViz podcast feed, right?
Yeah, and optimistically, I'll be back at it next season, and I'll be posting it out. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned indeed. Hasan, this was a treat. So much fun. You are officially my favorite FFPC Weekly Challenge lineup builder that I've ever had on the show. We'll do this again sometime for sure. Until then, I'm just going to have to listen to the Fantasy Football Report and get my Hasan Rahim fix in that way. Enjoy the rest of the game tonight, and thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you for the event. Thanks. And good luck, everyone, this week.
Absolutely. 4 teams on bye. Get your Cardinals, your Buccaneers, your Giants, and your Panthers out of your lineup, and make sure you're fixing those teams with the FFPC waiver wire coming up at 10 a.m. on Sunday. I want to thank our producer, Matt Deutsch, and obviously Hasan Rahim. myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Play in the weekly challenge now. It will lock at 1 p.m. on Sunday. That is where to go to win some money in the FFPC this week. Next week, we'll be back 7 o'clock Eastern time. Establish the runs. John Daigle will take us through 2 full hours leading up until that Thursday night football game. For Hasan Rahim and Matt Deutsch, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Talk with you again next Thursday.